and you basically very kindly and carefully bring this to their attention. Number 20, collectively are the key papers persuasively, 1, recent enough, 2, written by research leaders in the field, and 3, published or publishable in leading journals. Now, some of these you might modify for the circumstances of the type of student you're looking at, but as a collection, to me, they are an important set of considerations that I'd be looking for from students. And if, for example, they give me a paper that is very old, I'm basically going to say to them, you're missing an opportunity here. The risk is that old paper they've identified is basically out of date. It's redundant and would then be potentially a source of a flaw in any research that they would do. And the bottom one there on this slide, number 21, is again coming back to this connectivity. It's an ongoing theme. It's the connectivity of, as a trainer, are they giving a good answer to this part as well as how it connects with everything else that they're telling us? So what about the motivation and puzzle? Here's a few things as trainers that I suggest you think about. And the top one there is the connectivity thing. So does what is being said and painted as a broad and big picture motivation for the work, does that really connect with everything that they've talked about thus far in the pitch? So the next one is number 23. So is the motivation sound and academically persuasive? So you as trainers need to make a call on that. Is there a real puzzle identified? And it's quite interesting. A lot of students see in the materials, it's a motivation or a puzzle. So I better use the word puzzle, and I'm just going to describe anything that I do as solving a puzzle. And I understand and sympathise with students that do that, but they miss an important point here, that some papers do really have a puzzle that is a good motivation for going down that path of research. And a good example of a puzzle is where we look out into the real world and we see certain activity and practices, and then we look to the textbooks and the journals and they tell us the theory. So we have practice and theory which should match. But a puzzle often presents itself where what we observe and what the leading scholars tell us of theory, they clash. And that's a puzzle, and that's a non-trivial puzzle that I'd like students to think about if it's relevant to their work. So the next one, to what extent does the motivation link to real-world considerations? So it's a bit of an extension of what I've just been talking about. Does the motivation go beyond a bland set of general statements that amount to, and I've seen this with students, and I hope if you're a student in the room and you think I'm picking on you, I apologise, but as trainers, we don't want a set of sentences that basically just sound like the student saying, I've got some data, let's go fishing, and they're just hoping to catch something, find anything, and that will be good. They'll think that that's good research, and of course you might be lucky, but mostly it's just going to be quite exploratory. Now, for some students, and I know for many of you, you're training master's level students, and maybe this type of research is okay. Exploratory research where it's a bit of a fishing exercise. So I'm happy to modify my advice, but I think when we get to the PhD level and we're really trying to produce PhDs that are internationally competitive, many cases exploratory studies are a little bit underachieving. And so I always like to think of challenging students to go beyond the exploratory. So number 27 is the motivation. So remember, this is for you as trainers to think about when you're reading the material. Is the motivation sufficiently specific to induce reader interest in this very piece of work rather than being a generic motherhood motivation? So I think what this reflects for me, having seen hundreds and hundreds of pictures, is I see cases where there's a generic motivation that's given, which on the face of it's fine, but what goes in my what I have in my thinking is that this motivation could apply to 10, 20, 50 other pictures, and I think, well, that's okay to an extent. Maybe with master's students, that's fine, but I think a really persuasive motivation piece will be one that is tailored and targeted uniquely to the research of the student. And then the final one there is thinking how, I guess, and a lot of this is interactive, so it's thinking about, well, does this motivation, will we see that this motivation that's laid out here is actually consistent and cohesive and compatible with what remains in the rest of the pitch? So if you think about those 4 items together, this is all. I've been thinking about these mini pitch components for a long time, and this is now, as a result of saying I want to do this, train the trainers, it's now coming to a more specific concept in my mind that those 4 items, in a sense, are like a big picture pitch. It's a sub-pitch within the bigger context. And what I would say to you as trainers then is to think about these 3 perspectives of this big picture pitch. So firstly, are the 4 items in this sub-pitch sufficiently connected? Are they optimally brief, clear and focused? Secondly, will they facilitate a meaningful conversation with you? You're an expert in the field, and hopefully they will. And then the third is, has the pitcher succeeded in selling this big picture pitch to you? Has a persuasive, broad framing or positioning been achieved in these first 4 items? All right, I might speed up a bit. I don't need to go through every element here because I think you're now getting the idea, and hopefully you're finding, as trainers of the, if I'm training you as trainers, then there's a whole bunch of things that you can look at as to how you deal with your students. Now, around the idea, it's thinking about, is the core idea clear, concise, simple, compelling? Is the idea founded on robust, relevant theory? Theory is important. It's not given an explicit role in the template. I think of it as happening to the side, because it can be quite a big effort and a big focus in itself. So I want to keep it out of cluttering up the framework, but theory is important. Does the idea have too many moving parts? So again, I'm worried about when the student tells me specifically what their paper or their proposed paper is, they want to overcomplicate it. There's a whole bunch of other things there. Is there theoretical tension? Is there any aspect of the idea that raises a big red flag for you as the trainer? Like a deal breaker, and you just think, this is not feasible. And the final point on this slide is again around that connectivity theme. Data, a whole bunch of things I can tell you to think about there. So the proposed data fit for the purpose? Are all aspects of the data sampling decision sensible, realistic, insightful, reflective of research design trade-offs? Does the data sampling design mimic the gold standard for academic research in your field? So as a trainer, you should have a good view on what that might be. And there's a whole bunch of other things here for you to think about. And in fact, I think with this one, there were quite a lot of things that came to mind for me. So the first one on the top of this slide, if hand-collected data are planned, are there any feasibility concerns? Number 46, what data quality assurance can be given if we're in that situation? Tools, are the proposed tools fit for purpose? I think that's a good thing for the trainer to think about. So the student says, I'm going to do this, this and this, or the tools I'm going to use are these. Are they identifying the right tools for the job? So there's a whole bunch of things there for you to think about, and there's a deal breaker one there as well. So that's a package of three. They're the basic building blocks: the idea, the data and the tools. Now as trainers we can have a view of those individually. We should also have a view of them collectively, because there is a chance that individually the students say some quite reasonable and clear things, but they're actually not working together. So here are three perspectives around what I call the basic building blocks sub-pitch. So like the previous one, are the three items in this sub-pitch sufficiently connected, optimally brief, clear and focused? Will they facilitate a meaningful conversation with you? You're the expert in the field. And has the picture succeeded in selling this basic, and now I give it a different but I think quite reflective title. This pitch is really the basic what/how. It's mainly how pitch for their research. So we then get to, so we've done the 4-piece, the 3-piece, now we're at the 2-piece. This is the two key questions. So what's new? So what I suggest as trainers you think about when you're reading what students say here. So is the novelty in the idea, the data or the tools? Now other things equal, I think a stronger pitch and a stronger potential piece of research will have its main novelty in the idea. And you could think about rating each of the novelty dimensions. So, you know, with the idea, if there's novelty, is it weak through to the strongest? Is similarly for the data, similarly for the tools. Now here we start to get some more green stuff. These were thoughts that I had as I was working these slides up over the last few days. Number 63. Is the claim novelty meaningful or just a trivial variation on existing themes in the literature? As an expert in the field, you should have a broad take on that. Number 64, is the claim novelty overly reliant on gap spotting? So students do tend to sort of get a feeling when they get exposed to research, I've got to find a gap, I've got to find a gap. And I think as a